Imagine having to mourn a loved one in secret. 1 month on, that seems to be the lot of many inside a shell-shocked Iran. This after seeing the regime shut the internet and start the shooting at unarmed protesters across the country in towns big and small last month. And when the lights came back on, the Islamic Republic of Iran had gotten away with the very bloodbath that Donald Trump had warned not to carry out. While Washington's attentions now shifted to nuclear negotiations with Tehran, France 24's investigative unit has been hard at work on the testimony and images sent their way, with contacts risking their own lives by getting the word out. We're going to show you an excerpt from their documentary, Iran Massacre Under a Blackout. You can sometimes win a war by annihilating your enemy. We'll ask our panel about the bloodbath, the subsequent arrests, and if in a nation of 90 million, Iran's clerics can simply annihilate dissent. Today in the France 24 debate, we're looking inside of Iran's crackdown. With us, he's one of the reporters who put together that documentary, Ershad Alajani of our fact-checking and citizen journalist website, the France 24 Observers. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
And her latest documentary, Put Your Hand on Your Soul and Walk, Iranian filmmaker Sepideh Farsi is with us as well. Welcome back.
Hello.
From London, her latest piece for Harper's Bazaar, an open letter to the women of Iran. Journalist Tara Kongalu, author of The Heartbeat of Iran. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
You can always listen to the show wherever podcasts are streamed. It was January the 8th. You, Ershad, were sitting in that very chair. Tara, you were telling us from London how your WhatsApp messages for the past 2 hours no longer had the check marks that show they've been received by their interlocutors inside of Iran. And while we were discussing, here's an excerpt from that documentary showing what was transpiring. First, though, we must warn you, the following clip includes graphic images.
How are you? Have you lost internet? Reza, is everything okay?
From that point on, the only source of information was a few hundred Starlink connections.
That night they unleashed hell.
نترس نترس خواهرم هیچی نیست نترس
Rubina was one of the first slaughtered protesters identified because her aunt talked to international media.
روبینا دانشجوی دانشگاه شریعتی رشته مد و دیزاین پارچه و لباس بود. تصمیمم داشته روبینا که به اعتراضات بپیونده. بعد از اون رفته تو اعتراضات شرکت کرده و دیگه خبری ازش نداشتیم. گویا دوستانش با خانواده تماس میگیرن که بیاین تهران، روبینا رو با تیر زدن. خانواده اول فکر نمی‌کردن که فوت شده باشه و سریع خودشون رو میرسونن شبانه تهران.
That night, Ali once again joins the protest with his friends in Karaj, like he had every day since the demonstrations began.
توی چشمم ولی توی چشمم زدم تنها چیزی که میتونستید بشنوید صدای کلاشینکوف بود. همه چیزی که میتونستید ببینید آدمایی که یک دارن میافتن و خونی که اون کف خیابون داشت میرید. هر که میدیدید یا افتاده یا خون پاشیده رو لباسش یا زن بچه ها داشتن جیغ میزنن. من دوستم اول به پاش خورده بودش که افتاد. بعد که افتاد زدم تو صورتش گفتم پاشو خودتو جمع کن بابا یه دیتی الان باید که سری کمربندم آقا کردم اومدم به بالای سفید رونش ببندم. گفتم پاشو دیگه. بعد دیدم از زیر کاپشنش زیر کاپشنش خون زد بیره که زیپشی کشیدم پایین زم یه دونم تو قفص سینه‌ش تو همین مسیر بیمارستان که میرفتی میدیدی چقدر آدم همینجور رو زمین افتاده فقط اصلا اینگار که اینا آدم نبودن همینجور میدیدی گله به گله آدم افتاده ما کشیدیم بردیم تا بیمارستان ولی خب پرستو با تموم کرده کاریش نمیشه کرد کف اورژانس به قدری خون بود که وقتی داشتی میدویی پاتو میذاشتی زمین شدب صدا میکرد خود میپاشید به این برون خود دکتر و پرستارای اونجا رو اصلا نمیدونستن چی کار کنم
We talked to several doctors who were working that night. They all described scenes of chaos like never before.
شنبه من تیر جنگی میدیدم تیر جنگی خورده میدیدم که میارن خشمی که اینا این دفعه به نمایش گذاشتن اصلا قابل مواعظه آسیبایی که داشتم آسیبایی که میدیدم آسیبایی بود که انگاری داده در حال فرار مثلا بهشون رنگ کنم یا به صورت بی هدف توی جمعیتی یا زاویه‌ای مثلا رگباری گرفته بودن پزشک و خیلی شدای افشانداک میدارم خیلی ولی اون شب پنجشنبه من خودم گفتم چرا مگه اینا کی هم که اینجوری دارید میکشید
با تیر جنگی دارم مردم رو کشتن
Yeah, Arshad Alajani, that question, why are they massacring people, posed by that doctor?
The short answer is, if I want to talk about specific that event that night, is that the regime felt that the pressure is building up. The repression forces are stretched thin. There are millions of people crossing around the streets, so they could not control the crowd with less violent methods. If you want to push back 10,000, 20,000, around 1 million people in a street with non-violent method, you need, I don't know, tens of thousands of police agents. But you can massacre them with one dushka, a machine gun, and 4 Kalashnikovs, and that's what had happened. They survived based on the massacring the people. They had to kill people, tens of thousands of people to survive.
So that's the literal answer to the question. Then there's the broader, more humane answer. How can you shoot on your own people?
I think that's a question that Khamenei needs to answer. That he chose the same road that Saddam Hussein chose, was already went that down way. Bashar Assad, Hafez Assad, Gaddafi, and he's on the same road.
Tariq Angrulu, for those who are watching this from the outside, who don't follow Iran very closely, one of the starkest things you see in this documentary and in other sort of reports have come out in the last couple of days as journalists finally are able to piece together a more precise image of what happened, is that the first night, that Thursday where you joined us, the internet goes quiet, but because the internet goes quiet, some people don't really hear about the extent of the bloodbath and return to the streets the following night.
Absolutely. And quite a few people I've been speaking with just the past few days. And also when the internet blackout sort of ended to an extent, which, by the way, it hasn't fully ended. The receptions are not fully back the way they were before, and people are trying to get on through VPNs and other modes of connection. And almost all of them had no idea what was going on. Even on Thursday night, things got brutal. I was speaking with a young woman in Saudat Abad, at the sort of northern part of Tehran. And she was saying the mood that Thursday night was quite jubilant. People were excited, families were smiling, we were all united. She said, I saw babies, families with strollers, couples, elderly. She said, I saw a man with an oxygen tank. So you have to imagine this is a population that united together in hopes of, bringing forth some change and having the government listen to them. And as they were moving forward, without them knowing, forces and state police were shooting at them. And it wasn't until later when they saw the bodies and also talked to their neighbors or witnessed the atrocities that they realized what's really happening, because they were fighting in the dark. But still, I think they were so keen, they were so adamant that they went out again on Friday. I spoke with a woman in Rasht, and some images, I think, in your documentary shows the horrific scenes out of Rasht, which is a northern city where an entire bazaar was set on fire. And this 34-year-old woman, she's a nail technician. She told me, Tara, Thursday night we went out and I helped 3 men along the way. This young woman, she helped 3 men who were hit by pallets. Then she gets home and tells her husband, who stayed home that night, said, we're going out again. She said, we went out, no one's phones were working, and suddenly they turned the lights off and they start shooting into the dark. We got out of the car and 3 couples were all shot. None of them wanted to go to the hospital. They couldn't reach the family members. And the reason they didn't want to go to the hospitals were because Thursday night, security forces started also ambushing the hospitals. So back to your question, starting from that first day, the mood was harrowing, but also the chaos was profound. Just the people didn't know it, but knowing and having knowledge of the Iranian regime, they sure expected it and were very much alert and aware that something horrendous might unfold, but not to this extent, When
you speak to sources like the ones you've described, are they forthcoming with what they say, or are they sort of cowed and it's difficult to talk about it?
Same young woman said to me, she said, Tara, all we want is a normal life. They have even taken that away from us. And she said, there's a sea of blood between us and this regime. And she said, we're no longer the same people who we were before that Thursday. None of us can sleep at night. This young woman herself, she said, every time I fall asleep, even for 1 or 2 hours, I have nightmares of police forces chasing me or me being shot at. And by the way, 2 people died in her arms that night. And she says, I go to, I cook, I cry. I go to the shower, I cry. I go to the gym, I cry. We don't deserve this. And the collective trauma that this nation of 90 million is facing is profound. And as someone else told me, she said, this trauma is not going to subside anytime soon. And it's only going to anger us and embolden us furthermore to be adamant in our asks, which is we want change. We no longer want this system and this regime the way it stands. And if we have to pay a price with our lives, so many of us have already given that price and paid that price. And we are willing to go on in this fight.
So Sepideh Farsi, there's that period of it was more than 10 days when the internet blackout was complete. How many days was it? It was
more, yes.
10 days, yeah. What was your thinking then, and how much contact have you had since with people inside of Iran?
It was nightmarish because not only were we all worried for our close family and friends, but also for the whole country, because we knew what was going on. We could guess, meaning not knowing exactly the extent of the horror. Still, we've had prior episodes by the regime, and we were expecting things to be quite bad. So even not having news was bad news, you know. And ever since, it has been, well, maybe up to 50% of the traffic. I can't say, but I know that it's very complicated to contact close people. I mean, my family members, some of them I can talk to, some I can not regularly. You know, I've talked to some twice maybe. It depends on where they are in Iran. It depends on how good the VPN they have access to is, you know, operating, and WhatsApp definitely.
And do they want to talk, or do they want to keep it short?
No, they do want to talk. It's again, depends. I mean, I had 2 days ago, I was amazed. A friend of mine from she's a civil servant in one of the top grades of administration in Tehran, working on something very unpolitical, you know, like practical for the city. And she was so open when she was talking to me. We were doing a video call. I was like, "Are you sure you?" And she said, "I'm beyond all of these things. I don't care anymore. We cannot live, and even the air we breathe is lethal. It's poisoned. The pollution is so high. We cannot go, and so we're basically beyond any kind of consideration." That you see what the other panelists, Mr. Ali Jani and Ms. Kangarloo, were just saying is that I think this regime has shown that there is, for a long time now, and this is yet another proof of the fact that the regime is not at all reformable. We knew that, but every other episode of revolt and rebellion in Iran shows it more clearly. And the fact that people have paid and are ready to pay the price, and the fact that the regime acted this way is because they knew that in 2022 and 3, because it went for almost a year, you know, in the Women Life Freedom, they really lost control. And it's still visible. And they knew that this present episode would be the end of them. So that's why they really employed whatever they could do, which was this horror, in order to keep control. But even this is, I would say, temporary, because you cannot keep killing people.
Well, let me ask you, let's get to that very question, because you're the author of a documentary where you're not allowed to go into Gaza, but you still make your documentary anyway. You have somebody who's in there as your conduit, and you're able to film a story that's powerful. We're living in this so-called age of transparency now, where there's video images of everything. To a degree, they did put a lid on it, didn't they, the regime? And the story that we're telling now is 1 month late. Is it too late?
No, it's not too late. And, you know, in a way, they also wanted to frighten people. That's why some of the videos that came out from Kahrizak, a couple of them were leaked and actually shown on the TV, on the state TV. I think one of the strategies of the regime was to frighten people, not to go out. The other one was to put the lid, and they're still doing that. They use both. Depends on when and how, and regarding which part of the population and which category of people, because they showed it. They really showed that some footage from the Kahrizak morgue on the state TV, which is amazing. One would say, why? You know, because they wanted people to get frightened.
Yeah, and you had that in your documentary. There's this pro-regime preacher who goes on television and warns people, you know, better stay home.
He's not a preacher. If I want to a little bit explain who is he is a retired IRGC commander, Revolutionary Guard commander. And despite he's retired, he's one of the closest IRGC commanders to Khamenei, Ali Khamenei, and his son Mojtaba Khamenei, because they were in the same unit during the war between Iran and Iraq. So each time that they think that the repression must go through bloodshed, they
roll him out.
Yeah, he's their guy. Hossein Yekta. He has been active in Syria. He has been active in bloodshed in 2009, in 2019. each because he has a group of former criminals and extremist Islamists, and they deployed them not to crowd control. They deployed them literally to kill, as the protesters. We have their testimonies, or doctor says, and the images prove that they've been not there to crowd control. They've been there to kill. We have Ali, and we have other medical stuffs that they picture us the scenes of summary executions in the streets and in the hospitals. They came, they verify if a body on the ground is alive still, he's just injured, and they finished him. Summary execution in the streets. And there are dozens of witnesses for that. So I think the message was clear that if you mess with us, we are going to kill you.
So Tarek Kangarloo, we're on the outside looking in, and so we're trying to make historical comparisons with the protest movements that overthrew the Shah in '78, this sort of thing. But is it wrong to even try to make comparisons with the past?
So before I answer that question, I want to share this thought that I oftentimes think about when I think about the regime's behavior toward the Iranian people. And that is, a wild animal is dangerous, but what's more dangerous is a wounded wild animal that is in danger. And I think that encapsulates why the Iranian regime and the Islamic regime has been behaving the way it has been behaving this past protests and also in the previous rounds of demonstrations, because they are afraid of the will and strength of the people, even though they are unarmed. And if I may, I think one thing that I want our viewers, especially in the United States and around the world, to remember are not just these harrowing images, all right, these tragic stories that we are recounting that are absolutely important to document, talk about, and show the world. But also, I think it's vital to humanize the Iranian people and understand what they want, what they're capable of, and how much their grievances are similar to millions of others around the world. And it's the dignity, strength, and capacity that the Iranian people have that oftentimes are missing from these headlines. And I've covered crises around the world as you have, and we often tend to move on from one story to another when the crisis subsides. But I think right now we're at a moment that the Iranian people more than ever are asking the world to continue listening to their stories, not just the tragedy, but what they're capable of, what they want, and how they want to belong to the rest of the world, and how them coming out of this isolation and moving beyond their regime would make the world a better place. And I think that's something that we sometimes miss. Comparing this movement, these protests to those of the 78, 79, I think, of course, the first thing is that the demographics were quite different. The population was smaller. Like it or not, literacy rate wasn't as high. There was a small population that were highly educated, and the rest were rural, not as educated. And the clergy had a lot of sway, a lot of power, and there were also various political factions involved within the sort of anti-Shah protests. And the way I would sum it up in simple terms is that right now, you have a unified nation where secular, religious, women with hijab, women without the hijab, young, old, rich, poor, they're all united saying, we don't want this regime. We want to move beyond this system. And I think that's the main difference topped with the fact that the majority of Iranian people are highly educated. I think just to give some numbers, you'll be surprised to know that 60% of college graduates in Iran are women. Women have high rates of participation in the civil society and professional spaces, as do men. But unfortunately, this vibrant, talented nation is suffering from profound economic hardship. So they're united in their grievances. And unlike what we saw perhaps in 1979, the civil society is further unified in their ask: secular democracy, separation of religion and state, and the fact that they want to decide for themselves.
All right, when the internet was restored, the supreme leader lashed out at the United States and Israel. That's a common theme. He also, and this was a clip we played in that report, had this to say in his first public statement.
ما کشور رو به سوی جنگ نمیبریم. ما بنا نداریم کشور رو به طرف جنگ ببریم. اما مجرمان داخلی رو هم رها نمی‌کنیم. ملت ایران همونطور که کمر فتنه رو شکست، کمر فتنه‌گر رو هم باید بشکنه.
Sepide Farsi Ali Khamenei is, of course, somebody who lived through even before that. He was in the Shah's jails before he rose to power. And when he's making that statement, there's a lot to unpack there. Is he referring to abroad, or for him is the enemy domestic? Is the enemy other Iranians?
This is the usual rhetoric he uses, you know. The terrorists, I mean, fetnegar means those who, it's beyond rioters. I don't know how you would translate those who, the corrupt.
Who does he see as the enemy?
Well, I think it's a broad, you know, all those who are inside the country, obviously we who are outside, definitely, and the point of the, you know, the edge of the attack has always been America, Israel, England. I mean, that's that's not the point. The point is he's been saying that for as far as he's been in power. The thing is that young people are determined to go beyond this regime. Mainly, I mean, if you look at those whom we lost, all these thousands of people, they're all young. It's amazing that they just went out. I mean, teenagers, young people, it's much higher. I think the rate of victims, young victims are much higher than before. And this shows how desperate people are and how much hope they have, because as a young person, you know, you might think that, okay, you're braver perhaps. As a young person, you're more like, you might tend to be more adventurous, but it's also how desperate they are to go out. And it also, I want to mention something that I think the regime is recurring not only to bullets, but also to rape, to executions. I've had horrible news today. Every time I open my phone, it's like a nightmare. There was a woman, mother of a young girl who was killed, who was raped. And who is saying this? It's not rumor. The husband is sitting next to her, and both are facing the camera, and he's explaining how she was raped while he was in arrest. Both of them were in custody. I mean, this kind of things, what kind of regime is doing this to a mother who lost her child, you know, who was killed, and executions? Doctors who were killed, young people executed, artists, students, you name it, any category of the society who was, you know, just peacefully protesting. And I think they know that this is the end. As Tara was mentioning, I think they are wounded and they are wild, and that's why they're behaving this way.
Irshad Alajani?
I think that when Khamenei speaks, we need to decipher what he's talking about. When he says people, he's not talking about 90 million people. He's talking about just his fan base, his base of support, tens of thousands of people. Or when he says government, he literally means himself. When he says nizam, government, state, when he says state, he literally means himself. When he says state must do that or state thinks like that, it means I think like that.
Like
or
Louis
I
XIV, the state is me?
Yeah, exactly. That's literally what he means. And I think when the excerpt that you broadcast, he was not talking to Iranian people. He was talking to U.S. governments that we are here and we don't give up. And the message this was destinated not to Iranians, but to the foreign governments, France, I don't know, England or United States. And another sign, because this theater needs to be deciphered, the slogans that came after that is death to United States, death to England. So, you know, the
Okay,
slogans
those are slogans that remind us of...
They have been chosen what slogans must be chanted when.
So those are slogans from throwback to 1979 and the hostage crisis at the U.S. Embassy. But if this regime was stuck in 1979, it wouldn't still be in power. It's still here in 2026, nearly 50 years on.
You should not forget the oil factor. As far as Khamenei can sell oil, so he has money to feed the IRGC apparatus to beat up the people, to kill the people. So it's not a normal theocracy or dictatorship we are talking about. The curse of oil, you should not forget that.
If I may add something, if they were not so desperate, I mean, I agree with you, but also you take into consideration that they accepted the negotiations with the US. That was Khamenei's red line. He never wanted to. Why are they there at that table? That means that they are desperate, that they're cornered.
Let's take a look at the news of the past couple of days. A string of arrests inside the country. And this time it's not radical dissidents, but many high-profile names linked near or far to reformist former Prime Minister Mir Hossein Mousavi, who was front and center in the 2009 Green Movement. Tara Kankarlu, your thoughts on this wave of arrests? Is this the usual script or is this something new?
I very much think it is the usual script after any protests in Iran, whether it was 2022, 2019, 18, 2009, and even, by the way, in the earlier years of the revolution, after the revolution, rather, we saw major and massive crackdown against dissent, intellectuals, lawyers, human rights activists, writers, journalists. A woman that I was interviewing a few days ago said some of our brightest are in Evin prison. Evin prison is like a university, a library, because that's where all of the thinkers, people who can actually forge a path forward for Iran, are being held and arrested, as well as other prisons. So I don't think this is unusual. This is a tactic. And of course, you know, while many in Iran don't believe in reform, nor the reformist candidates or reformist figures, some still do. And I think these sort of high-profile individuals are sending a signal to them. Again, we have to remember this is a country of 90 million. Iran is not a monolithic society. People have different ideas, different viewpoints. While united in the fact that they want to move beyond the regime, they still have, you know, different thinking. And there are people still in Iran that are part of this reformist camp. And of course, the fact that the government is attacking them is further echoing their fear and their weakness. And the question that, you know, who is Khamenei's audience is, quite frankly, anyone who he sees as a threat. He sees the Iranian people as a threat, and anyone in the world who wants to jeopardize his reign, his power. And I want to echo and go back to the issue of selling oils. Again, multiple things can be true at the same time. You can not want to have the Islamic regime, but you can also agree that sanctions are detrimental to the well-being of the civil society and ordinary people. I was in Iran in 2015 covering the nuclear talks, and people again, while resentful toward the regime, and while many of them at that time not wanting the regime and not believing in reform, they still wanted the sanctions lifted. And we need to remember that the sanctions and the choking of Iran's economy has only emboldened the hardliners in Iran, including Khamenei and his camp and the most powerful within the IRGC apparatus, and has quite frankly choked and killed Iranians economically, financially, emotionally, psychologically, and to the point that we've seen in the last month.
Yeah, the world, of course, now remembers the help is on the way promise that Donald Trump put out over social media in the opening days of the bloodshed. The report that we aired highlighted an earlier post that the U.S. president put on Truth Social.
Iran shoots and violently kills peaceful protesters, which is their custom. The United States of America will come to their rescue. We are locked and loaded and ready to go.
Okay, they were locked and loaded, but they didn't go. Sepideh Farsi, your thoughts? Because, yeah, the news cycle is going to move on, and it's going to move on to the next round of nuclear talks in Oman that you were referring to earlier. This sort of erratic messaging from Washington.
It is very highly irresponsible in regard to the Iranian people who lost their lives, who are going to lose their lives. I'm not for a military intervention, but this way of talking is as irresponsible as Khamenei's. I mean, you push people to go out and to attack the regime's institutions, saying that help is on the way. I mean, who would talk like that?
He said in the last hour that he might send another aircraft carrier. There's already the Abraham
it might
Lincoln.
change in a half an hour again, because Mr. Trump has been known for being erratic, and he has shown it time and again.
So we're sitting in a climate-controlled studio in Paris.
Yes.
Do people from the outside favor some kind of airstrikes on Iran, or?
What do you mean, people from outside?
From people, Iranians who are outside of Iran.
Iranians from the diaspora?
Yes.
Well, you know, as we mentioned before, I think Iranians inside and outside, we're a big country. There are several millions of Iranians outside Iran, so some do favor that, and many don't. So it's not a monolithical opinion, you know. I remember, like, when Yugoslavian war was on, you know, we had deep discussions, like, with friends, close friends, and some were saying, yes, we need international intervention to stop the killing. Some said, no, that would make it worse. Or for Iraq. I mean, it's a matter of, it's difficult to predict. Again, intervention, we would need to know what kind of intervention, you know? Is it like in June, past June 2025, we had attacks on Iran by Israel and then the US. What happened? They claimed that they annihilated the Iranian nuclear capacity, but then months later we heard that no, well, actually they did not annihilate it. So, I mean, if it's going to kill civilians and destroy the infrastructure of Iran, because this belongs to the Iranian people, you know, then there's no point of doing it. If it's going to, but generally I'm against it, and I think there are other ways, like putting the IRGC on the terrorist organization list is something very useful, and it was done recently by Europe.
Right. Ershad Alajani, what's the vibe you're getting when you speak to people inside of Iran on this?
First, what we think, either abroad or inside Iran, Iranians, I think it's irrelevant to what will happen. It's a fight between Khamenei and Trump, and no one has words to say about that. But another thing, I want to quote Ali, our source in Iran, that we followed him for days. He said, "Which nation do you know that stare at sky and waiting for the bombs to drop?" And he says that we gave anything that we could our friends, our lives, our bodies, our souls.
So there are people rooting for bombs from the sky.
Out of desperation, yes, and they say that as much as I could talk to Iranians, obviously, I didn't talk to 90 million people. They say we did anything that we could, and we face the bloodshed. So, and what we can do more, and Trump made this expectation when he says that we're gonna hit you, we are gonna hit you hard, and people, at least people that I talk to, they are literally waiting.
Tara Kongerlu?
The sentiments vary, but what's clear is that the Iranian people are, in their, in the words of, again, a young woman, feel futureless, feel helpless, hopeless, and futureless. And to elaborate on that, that same person said, we are extremely aware that the United States and Israel strictly have their own interests at heart. They don't have the interests of Iranian people. But unfortunately, nor does our governing regime, and we are stuck in this limbo. Another telling quote by a young man was that we just want to know what's going to happen next. We have to really understand that the Iranian people are living in a collapsed economy, all right, topped with this detrimental collective trauma that they've endured. They just want to know what happens next. And he said, if we know that this regime is staying, all right, we're going to figure out a way to move forward. If we know that there's going to be an attack, okay, we need to figure out what next. I think this ambiguity, this lack of clarity is what's keeping a nation of 90 million on the edge right now, waiting to be heard, to be seen, all the while not having much trust in the United States and, of course, its allies, because they've seen what happened in the region. They know better, and they're quite wary of that.
Yeah, I think. Most of them, they have no disillusion that human rights or their freedom is on the table between Ali Khamenei or Trump or Netanyahu. But what they hope, I think, is that maybe this fight, byproduct of this war, become miraculously some kind of democracy for them. What they think out of desperation, as I understand.
Just in one word, because we're out of time. You heard earlier Tara Kongerlu saying how right now people are shell-shocked, and that's going to turn to anger. Your report concludes with these gut-wrenching text messages that you received, all of you, the reporters who worked on this. Is that how you feel it as well?
I think it's 90 million people PTSD situation here. People are a mixture, a cocktail of anger and disappointment and depression. I talk to people in Iran and they are deeply depressed, anger to their bones, and disappointed, really disappointed and angry.
Your report in full on our website, France24.com. Ershad Alajani, I want to thank you. I want to thank as well Sepideh Farsi for being with us. Tara Kongerlu in London, thank you for joining us here on the France 24 Studio.